And by the way,
Yeah.
if you do want to build your own database and you're looking for some fantasy football data, head over to footballguys.com. There is a ton of free data, and they did a lot of the calculations for you, even for regular PPR leagues or non-PPR leagues. So you can actually take some of their data, and you can also look at things like snap data dating back as far as you want to go. I wouldn't go back much more than about 6 to 8 years. And you can look at game summaries. You can look at all kinds of data for free over at footballguys.com as well. So lots of data out there to build. But the ADP database that you built off of FPPC data, where we do a lot of our play for money, this is incredible data that is there for folks to find different solutions. And as you continue to parse this data, you're learning a lot more position by position.
Yeah. And I've already uh, recorded some lessons on the quarterback, where Dennis and I are going to go through that as well. And even though I've done it personally, now with Dennis, that allows his pattern skills to come up, and hopefully that will hammer home what we need to hammer between the two of us. We're not perfect, but I think we're better than either one of us. And that's what I've noticed working with a weather guy. Who would have thought? When I grew up, the weather guy was played Bozo the Clown down here. So he's doing the kiddie show during the afternoon and the weather at night. And I don't know if there's if that's universal, but here in Arkansas, I think that was the case here. The weather guy. Nowadays, it's they got so much now. It's not that way anymore. But in the old days, it was. So quarterbacks, we're going to start out with. I've sent Dennis these figures, the database he's working on with his MVP. Check out the Science of Fantasy Football. Check out Dennis's MVP ratings for players. I got my lesson plans, the Excel lessons on how to build a database. There's lots of goodies there you can check out. Anyway, Dennis, this is quarterbacks. This is my AI figure here. You can look at that. And by the way, I'm recording this, Dennis, visually. So I'll put this on, even though they've got my lesson plan. Now we'll have you done it. You'll be with me as well. So we'll go through this. And this first chart here, Dennis, is ADP sector, where I broke it into halves, each round into the half six, right? So I'm assuming 12 players. I mean, if you only play in 10, then you can get your database and break into fives. I break into sixes because I do 12 players. And it's 2015 to 23 on the top. And in each box is the quarterback average at the end of the season PPR points. So it's kind of, the ADP is before. So it's kind of before, right? Before I turn my cards over. And then after, how much of the pot did I win, right? And so it's before now. I call it end of the season, EOS. So preseason, PS, and EOS. And we go
and this
from,
is for one the
this is
ADP
one
here.
quarterback, non-super
Correct.
flex.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I don't play a lot of super flex. Dennis and I do dabble in some tournament play and things with on FFPC. They have the Superflex tournament. It's kind of fun. We've made it through the first round, made a little money, but not much. We're just on that edge. We need that year breakthrough to move deep into the tournament, but we're not there yet. but we'll get there. We're building our data, but this is one quarterback. So Dennis, then I colorized based on that's why I love Excel. You can go conditional formatting and change the color based on the value the end of the season average. And deep green is good, red is bad. So just intuitively, if you don't know anything about this, you can say, okay, I can see where it's good, where it's bad. And we went from ADP sector 13 to 18 through 157 and up. I just threw all the squirrels into one big bag and and way at the bottom. And so, some people start at, 2023, and you can see the first group of quarterbacks coming off were really spectacular in 2023. Kind of have a dead zone there, and then we had a few outliers. So if you're a deep QB drafter, you might have benefited. There was actually 4 or 5 sectors that didn't do too bad, but there was some zonks. If you remember, let's make a deal way back in the day. This is old school. This is beyond old school. This is Papal school data there. If you watch Let's Make a Deal, in the old days, we had TVs with things called antenna. And, we had 3 channels and we were happy, with our TV, Swanson TV dinner. There was this little TV tray and you'd watch Let's Make a Deal for lunch there.
And Jay was always the guy that was dressed up in a goofy outfit.
Well, he was the weatherman, Dennis. He was the weatherman later. Okay. He was the weatherman. Come on, Dennis. There's something about clowns and weather that just it worked in the 60s and 70s. Now, it's data and they have, slick suits and, they got a lot of let's just say attractive people. If they put you or I up there, it'd be, who are these gnomes here? Who are these hobbit looking, orc looking fellows out here trying to tell us some data stuff? So no, we're not attractive folks. We're just look like we just here. Me, I look like I just came off the moonshine out of the woods here in Arkansas. And, out of a hee-haw commercial. So anyway, I got Dennis laughing. But Dennis, we can see this elite quarterback here. 2021, 2022, first 3 or 4 rounds was really good. Look at 2021. The golden age of quarterbacks was in 2021. If you were a late quarterback drafter, you did well. That you couldn't help but do well. So that meant that you probably took quarterbacks for granted in 2022, and it got a little bit lean. And last year, after the 3rd round, you could have got some zonks, Dennis. It was very elite. So in just the last 3 years, the landscape has changed. And I'm not talking, if you look at 2015, 16, 17, notice people weren't even drafting early quarterbacks much. And that 2015, I think that might have been Andrew Luck's season when he got hurt.
Ooh, yeah.
I think that's what that sadness is there. But notice the draft tendencies. Starting about 2019, people started drafting quarterbacks earlier. So I think the idea of a late quarterback drafting made sense in 15 to 18. I'm not sold unless your diary says that you're able to pick the goodies late, Dennis. You could have got burned. And now, when I say that word burn, that means we're talking 150 points less over the season. So weekly, 5, 6, 7 points less. And I know if you're good, you could make that up. But I just hate every week to know that I've got to shoehorn in between, some of the so-called duds versus, I'm going against Mahomes or Hurts or Allen, and I know they're gold and they don't even have to worry about the quarter. They just plug it in and, get ready to kick my ass in the other positions. And that was not a good feeling last year in some of the leagues where I didn't have the elite quarterback. And I know you've got maybe some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I about 3 years ago, I started picking up on the trends when you start looking at 2019, 2020. In total points, it wasn't as obvious, but when you break it down into a weekly value tool, the number of elite quarterbacks, when you look at their consistency, was starting to dwindle. So what that told me is that the advantage of an elite quarterback was going to be there. And you see, I started drafting elite quarterbacks in 2020. Now I was getting them a little later, so that was great. But I was on one of the first three quarterbacks starting in 2020. And you see that fantasy football consensus has caught up to me. Even your dog notices
Yeah,
that they've caught up.
he heard a
But
hoodoo outside.
that is the key to being able to be ahead of a trend, and now the trend is here. And last year, you're right, you were at almost about a 10-point deficit every week
And
if
that
you
sucks.
didn't have Hurts or Allen. And Mahomes even dropped off of that group.
Yeah.
Mahomes was one of the weaker sisters in that data last year.
Yeah.
So if you miss, I guess he was seventh. He was seventh when it comes to a consistency look on a weekly value. That's not good at where he was being drafted, because he was being drafted in the top three. And I got news for you. You draft somebody in the top three and they're seventh. That's not beating consensus. So it will hurt you. But yeah, you're always going to see these changes. And the key is to catch up with the changes. But that's what this data is going to clue us into, is to when to know, hey, maybe the trend will be there in another year or two to go late quarterback again.
Yeah. So I just switched to looking at the now total points. Mahomes didn't do too bad.
No, not bad at all. But consistency, he had a dud of a year.
Yeah. And so I'm just looking, looks like the first 4 rounds, looks like the first dud was who was that? That Burrow got hurt. So you got
Yeah.
Lawrence didn't do I mean total point. Justin Fields was a little weak sauce. Tua did, I'm down in the 60 to 66. So Dennis, in my lesson plan, I actually have all the names and the sector and the year, so you can go historically. Kirk Cousins got hurt, but if you had Dak Prescott, he was a good value late. I mean, you can see where Purdy didn't do too bad. Goff did pretty good total points. But then, Anthony Richardson got hurt, and we were so high on him. I look forward to him coming back. So I've got the data where you can actually track then, it that way by the person. This is just a global average here. But I think the takeaway is that the earlier quarterbacks in the last 3 years have paid off more than they have been, Dennis. So that I think that's how. And then so this leads to my old friend, the boxing and whisker, Dennis.
Oh, love the box and whiskers.
Yeah, so you can see, look at 2015, 16, 17, 18. Look at where the boxes are. It looked like 2019, something completely, somebody flipped the switch. And by the way, Dennis, I have on this figure, you can actually see what the box and whisker means it's quarters. So if you cut the pie into four slices, and the box represents 50% of the data. So two of the pieces. The top piece is the top of the box to the top of the whisker, and the bottom piece, the yucky piece, the one that your grandkid or at the, stuck their finger in and tasted it, the old salmonella piece, they're snotting and snouting. By the way, and I know as a parent, Dennis, when you had kids and they went to daycare, they brought home every rare childhood disease, and then I'm sick, right? It's like, you got measles? Where did I get that from? From the daycare. If you go to daycare as a 2-year-old, 3, I realized they were all chewing on everything, each other, toys. It was in the mouth, the fingers, the thumbs, the toes. It was just one big bacteria slobber fest. And as a microbiologist, when I walked in the room, I just saw this layer and sheen of bacteria, biofilm everywhere. It was like going into a cave and all this moss and crap was hanging down, bat guano, you're squishing through. That's what I felt like going to my first daycare as a first time parent. My eyes were wide open about filthy humans, right? You filthy apes, right? You dirty apes, as Charlton Heston said in Planet Apes. It was these filthy kids. Who wants these filthy, germ-laden kids here? So anyway, but the Box and Whisker, Dennis, really showed we have enjoyed a time, and I don't know if will it go back. Here's the thing. I know that it could be different because you look at this data. Imagine we went back to 2015. Can you believe what people would be saying if 2024 quarterbacks went back to the distribution 2015? Wow. Dennis, Twitter would be blowing up. Well, the new rules have finally caught up with the quarterbacks, or the refs have finally, jumped the shark. They're, whatever. I don't know what they would, they'd find a reason for it, right? Remember, in early human development, anything they saw and the crops grew good, they would, okay, that, the worms were thicker this year or whatever, the wool, the woolly worm theory, right? Oh, it's going to get cold, or the crops are going to be late this year. I mean, that's who we are. And so we try to find things at the drop of a hat. And we don't sit around and think of things. We just want to, knee-jerk. And Twitter's a perfect example of that, where whatever, to the minute. In fact, I think some of these cats on Twitter, Dennis, they have all these different responses to whatever's going on in the game, and they have them canned, and they can tweet out, yep, I told you this was going to, and they have about 15 different things. Yep, I was right. And, or, whatever. And I just wonder, do they even think about what they just saw? Or, well, his season's over, first game, first pass, he misses it. Well, he was a bust, and that guy, he was a bust. Or, yep, it's his season, first pass, whatever quarterback it is, probably the rookie quarterback, Dennis. They've got it's a bust season. He's, it's his Hall of Fame, and they've got that. Either way, they got that Twitter tweet ready to go, or X tweet, or whatever they call it now. So,
which is exactly why fantasy receipts will never go out of style.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, getting back to this Box and Whisker, Dennis, we've enjoyed some really interesting years on that. And if you look at the Box and Whisker, so your elite quarterback, you said you woke up to it and in 2020, but really 2019, if you were charting, can you imagine looking at 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19? Look at 19.
Oh, yeah.
What? I mean, you don't know 20's coming, and all you would see would be that significant, something happened that year, and we've been living in that, whatever that universe is right there. And that's kind of neat when you look at big global data changes. And so I'm curious. I mean, right now, the safest prediction is we're going to have 2024 to look a lot like 19 to 23. Kind of, we won't see a 15 to 18 ever again. That's what I hope, because if we do, people are going to be going crazy, Dennis.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see some little decline. I think we
Notice the
peaked.
bottom whiskers,
Yeah.
and the box is starting to drop a little bit. Yeah.
Yep. I think we've peaked. I think some of it has to do
I know
with
there's generational. You've talked about that theory. I had to jump in.
yeah,
Your
it's not.
idea about cohorts. We're in a good cohort. We've got a good crop. I hate to
Ooh.
compare them to plants, like feel like corn stalks, right? And each a corn has a face of a different quarterback here, like something silly on TV. But that's what it feels like. We got some hardy stock out there. You're an ag guy, hardy corn, and I think we can keep harvesting for a while. Curious to
Yeah,
see.
I think you're exactly right, but I think the top end has had been reached. We challenged the top of what could be done because defense is adjusted and we're playing more of this too deep stuff now that is keeping the big play off the boards. But what are we seeing here in the last year? We're seeing quarterbacks starting to adjust, starting to take what the defenses are giving them. And it's like they talked about Mahomes, death from 1,000 cuts instead of that one big gash. And that's what we're seeing. So, while I think we're going to see this year of the quarterback thing, this elite quarterback advantage continue, but I also think we're going to see the population of great quarterbacks start to enlarge again. And when that happens, then you can find your draft picks a little bit later. So you always have to adjust with the data, but I'm still leaning. Give me one of those top 4 or 5 guys this year, and I'll be feeling pretty good.
So this next figure, I go back to rounds, and you're saying, why do you do it? Well, because the more data points, the better things are historically, right? That's why fantasy baseball people have an advantage over us, because they have more games and more data. And so maybe rotisserie and these kind of scoring makes sense. Got 100 games to worry about. We got 17. I mean, quarterback can get hurt. They're not coming back. They're gone. And, even within, I mean, things are so risky. I mean, it's just, we're one dynamite explosion away from having our team, our season blow up. And I think that's just NFL. But anyway, historically now we look rounds 2 to 14. And so, Dennis, to get the top down that I like to look at, I looked at global averages over 9 years. And I think what catches my attention is that after round 6, it starts getting lean. There was an uptick in round 10. Something happened there. It's kind of like a little second peak and then again a decline. But my feeling, and I've been drafting the last 3 years, is if, I don't need to wait past round 6. And I know, Dennis, you count, quarterbacks off the board concept. I think we're doing the same thing. It's just I kind of put a round to it. You put a count number, but I think that's we're applying the same concept, maybe a little different, but I think what this data is showing. And if you look at the trend lines for these round data, and again, we've never had a quarterback in the first round. So if and when that ever happens, folks, that is a new deal. I probably would never feel comfortable the first year. I won't be the first quarterback in the first round to do it. So if you're in a goofy league and people in a one quarterback, non-super flex, 4-point kind of situation, I would never take a quarterback. So here I am saying never. I couldn't do that right now. But second round, I have taken quarterbacks in the second round. But anyway, here's the trend, Dennis. If you look at 19, 21, and 23, I plotted all the data from the chart, and you look at 23 and 2023s in red, and you can see that the top elite round 2, we drop round 3, stay about the same, and about round 6, we start that first roller coaster, big drop. We historically had something peaked round 12. So there is hope for late quarterbacks. I'm not saying there's not. Look at 2019. It was almost a straight line until the end. So there wasn't, yeah. And here's 2021. Look how far the plateau, it went to round 8. So even where times have been good in 2021, you could have waited to the 8th round. Last year, the 6th round, after that, was starting to get risky biscuits. And in 2019, everybody was almost the same according to the trend. Again, the trend line tries to cut through the variation. So it's not like, oh, well, I'll just do what the trend lines know. We don't always do what the data from last year tells us to. Okay. We're not, just because we're data people, we're not stuck in the data fly paper, right? In the old days, if you had you had windows, I don't know what, and you had a little flying things that come in, you put fly paper out. Now my wife is grossed out by it. So, we just have a fly swatter and pop it. Of course, my dogs think I'm going to beat them, and I never do, but they get scared when I point the fly flap at them, and they're scared. The cats just look at it like, "What you gonna do with that, fool?" I always got that Mr. T attitude. All the cats I've ever owned, like, "Fool, I pity the fool going to hit me with that fly swatter." And but the dogs, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to be bad. I'm not going to chew the furniture anymore. I'm not going to pee in the house. But the cat be like, I pity the fool going to hit me with that fly swatter. So look, I'm a big fan of A-Team. I love that show. George Papard, one of my favorite. Love Mr. T. Loved his whole persona. Of course, I like Ric Flair. I like wrestling. All those big persona folks. It's comical. I love that. The weather people should take from like championship wrestling. You ought to wrestle like 2 weather guys. Like, it's going to have a rain. No, it's not. Okay. Best man in the ring settles. Who puts the other in the sleeper hold or the iron claw? That's how you ought to settle weatherman differences, and have the clown weatherman as the referee there, that'd be great. Now
Ooh.
that's entertainment. Weather Channel, you listening? Just give me a taste of that idea. I came up with that idea first. Anyway, Dennis.
You do the severe weather turnbuckle.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. 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 There you go. Anyway, this is the trends. And that's why historically the 6th round, but sometimes it's been the 8th. Sometimes the trend line says, it's all good late. So I don't know. I'm worried about not taking a good quarterback. And again, I don't know what ADP is going to give me, right? If Anthony Richardson goes too late, he could be a late target. It just depends on how. Sometimes I get greedy and I always think, I'll get him. I'll be greedy and I'll hoard, those elite tight ends, RBs and WRs and take that old quarterback everybody's missing. I mean, that's the greed side of me. And I understand that kind of drafting too, but not every of my 40 or 50 drafts, I probably are doing things different just to shake it up a little bit.
And here's one thing that is interesting here when I look at this graph that really explains why I've been successful with this one weird strategy that I apply at quarterback. It's very simple. And I mentioned this in my Better Than Zero strategy articles. The earlier you draft a quarterback, the later you can draft a second quarterback. The later you draft that first quarterback, the sooner you better draft that second quarterback. So in other words, if I miss on the first 3 or 4 guys, I'll take 2 shots pretty close back to back. Last year in one of my drafts, I took Burrow, of course, was dropping because of the injury that he had early. So a late season draft right before the season. Burrow dropped into my lap pretty late, 1 quarterback league, all the way down to the 5th round. But I came back in the 7th because of the injury concern and took Kirk Cousins. Now I ended up losing them both. But until I lost them both, I had 2 very effective quarterbacks that I could depend on, because if I'm not going to have one of the top 3 guys, I'm going to have 2 shots at being good. In another league that I did that, I ended up taking Jordan Love and Matthew Stafford later in the draft. Both ended up being pretty good. They weren't elite, but they were pretty good. So that's a strategy that this chart says is very good to employ, because you got 2 shots at success later on to maximize your chance of being one of those closer to elite guys.
So the next thing I did, Dennis, and I'm going across lesson plans because you're a little bit more succinct than me. I start rattling on and get crazy. I did rounds, counts of quarterbacks drafted in that round, then the total at the end of the season, and I divided the points at the end of the season, the average by the total quarterbacks that were drafted in that round, and divided that. And you can see, looks like round 4 is the drop dead point. So I was thinking round 6, but when you look at the actual and look at the rare, again, this is 2015 to 23. Look at the rarity that have been drafted and again, this doesn't mean this is not Mahomes 4 or 5 times, right, Dennis? This is just, I'm not paying attention to names. I'm just each year, how many were drafted in round 2, 3, 4, etc., and then divide that by the average total points. And if you do that, it looks like round 4 is that point, that elite quarterback. So the grand data kind of wants to tell you that. And so when I draft that, I have the counts, and this is one of these combo charts here. It's in boxes. I mean, bars, orange bars. Sound like a tree here. I need one of those orange sickles, creamsicle, whatever. They were good. And then, yeah, my diabetes says no, but my childhood says yeah. And then the average points in green, and then I did a trend line of the average points. So, but you can see kind of starts getting lean. I mean, you don't want to be hanging around so late. I mean, after the 14th round, it's the numbers get wacky because there's just nobody being drafted out there, right? So there's a rush from rounds 5 to 14. And again, a lot of these in leagues, people want 2, 3 quarterbacks. But if you actually divide by what you're getting average by the counts, that points per player goes down a lot. We're talking 40, the round 2, 40, 43, 37, 40, round 5, 15, round 6, 20. I mean, it's dropping in half, Dennis, and gets worse down to round 14. I mean, it's just, overall, it tells you most likely if you're putting your hand in that bucket, you're getting a dud. You're not, sounds like, what was that? I have a little sister. I call her, she's 4 years. She had a mystery date game. Remember that? You'd
Oh
open,
yeah.
yeah, so I'd tease her, I'd make a little funny caricature, and I would tape it into the game board. So when she opened the window, it'd be something I'd drawn, some crude, probably rude picture, and she'd go screaming to mama, and I'd have to, I don't know, how'd that get there? You know, framing the little sister was half the fun, right? Okay, I gotta tell you something. Best time I did, I broke my mom's favorite lamp. So I put it back together. And so we were all with family and having, and my mom said, he told my sister, turn on the lamp. She went over and hit it, and the lamp disintegrated. And I knew it was going to happen. And I said, Mom, Ann broke the lamp again. And boy, she was mad, wanted to whip my sister. And I'd sit back, and my sister looked around. I just touched it. Yeah, that's bad. Dennis, I was bad. I framed her for the old broken lamp. It's like a Hardy Board case, the case of the broken lamp. But yeah, I put, took some old tape or something. My mom didn't quite see all that, but I rigged it back, and my sister touched that lamp and it broke, because I wasn't going to be the chump getting caught for it. So anyway, Dennis, I think this metric, almost the drafting efficiency, I don't know what you could call this, but I thought that was kind of interesting, this data, and I'll carry it further, Dennis. And I actually did average counts. So I had the total number, then I divided the average counts by the average points, and then if you graphed 2015 to 19 and then 20 to 23, and you did points per player, it's quite interesting what happens. And if you do the trend line, I'm cutting to the chase. The orange is 15 to 19, and the blue is 20 to 23. And notice rounds 2 and 3, Dennis, in the last 4 years have been such a premium versus, yeah, you see that? Look at that. And versus the 15 to 19. In other words, there's a bump, but notice the peaks in the old days, it peaked at round 4 and then dropped. And recently it's peaked around 3 and dropped. So things have been skewing as you predicted. And notice 2020. And by the way, when you said you started in 2020, I didn't make this graph based on that data, Dennis. This is just what the data led me to break the years up. And it just happens to fall with what you were following as well, your pattern skills. But look at the severity. And we haven't seen, in other words, we had an earlier peak, but then it fell, but it didn't fall as much as it did in 15. So the landing was a lot softer in the recent years as well. Then, after about round 10, it just, totally starts disintegrating here. But anyway, I've got this data as well. And then if you looked at the old box and whisker overall, and then look at the last, and I broke, I kind of cheated a little bit, went 2019 to 23. Here's the box and whisker versus 2015.
Wow.
Yeah, big difference. Folks, if you could see this, you would see we're talking, something happened in 2019. And look at the top whisker, 486 points. In 2015 to 18, the highest was 376. We're talking 110 point different in the extreme. We haven't ever seen that. In other words, if you were 2015 and you took a time machine, you were drafted in 2023, you'd be like, where the hell did this come from? There's nothing that you could have been doing that could have ever predicted that the best quarterback would give you 110 points over the season. What is that? About 8 points more. That's just gravy. That is just gravy. And nobody would have predicted that.
No, and the crazy thing is if you look at the bottom of the box for the later period, 2019 to 23.
Oh, it's lower.
It's that the bottom of that box is almost higher than the median in the 2015 to 18.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yes.
That's insane. So it's saying that the lower end of that group of that big population group, the lowest end is better than most of the quarterbacks in that earlier period. That's absolutely crazy. And the median is above the top
above the
of
box.
The box.
Yeah.
It's when you see that startling of a difference, that
things have changed.
That's a big change. And you can also see that your elite quarterback did not have an advantage in 2015 to 18. If you look at the difference from the top of the box to the bottom of the box, that's 94 points back then.
100.
Over 120 points difference. That's a huge difference in just such a short
late
period.
Quarterback was probably the order of the day in 2015 to 18. These days, your elite quarterback's going to, if it can keep on, like, again, we can argue, in the future, but it can put points in your weekly score if you can grab one of those. Yeah.
And I know from studying the data prior to 2015, because I've been playing fantasy football and crunching data since the early 90s. If you looked at this data, if you had the data to chart, what you'll notice is I put a bet on this. If you look at the years prior, you look at the late 90s, early 2000s, the box would be shorter from top to bottom and would be lower versus where this data is. So the quarterback position has really evolved. There's more of a difference between the top and the bottom of the starters at quarterback. We've seen it visually that having an elite quarterback has been more and more important. It's been a long time since a Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. So it's not just fantasy football, it's in real football. Having that Mahomes or Allen or Burrow, Lamar Jackson, you look at the winning percentages of those elite quarterbacks, and that is skewing as well. So in fantasy football, it's one thing, but the game has changed, and having that big armed quarterback is becoming more and more of a key in real football, but it's really showing up in the fantasy football numbers.
Yeah, it has. Dennis, have we exhausted this, or you want to go further? I got more. I mean,
let's dig down one more layer. Let's dig down one more layer.
Okay, let's see. What did I do here? Sometimes I forget what I've done, Dennis. Okay. So what I wanted to do was I used the box data and named those quadrants from the box, the top of the box to the top whisker is the extreme, the top 25%, the next 25, in the bottom. So I called it the excellent percentage, the above average, the below average, and the low here. And I charted that based on the half draft rounds in this figure, Dennis, and just look at the excellent quarterbacks that are Now, again, remember, this is not end of the season, Dennis. We're tracking based on ADP, so the public's making mistakes. But you can see the good quarterbacks, people are not missing them these days. They're going where you think they would go in the first 13 to the 30th. And you can see the trend of the best quarterbacks dropping by 157, the ADP. The low quarterbacks, you're not really paying a penalty to maybe the 97th pick, so the 102. So I don't know if that's the 8th round or so. And of course, then the above average, those guys start appearing with the best quarterbacks at about the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round, and they stay pretty much, and they actually predominate later. So like I said, we have a softer landing, so you can get an okay quarterback late relative to the sucky ones, the below average and the low guys, which you definitely will lose your league. But unfortunately, even Dennis, even the ones at the half of the box up to the top of the box, those guys are not doing it for you. You may be running in place with the orange guys. So if you look at kind of that, you can see that, I mean, for the most part, you're drafted really good quarterbacks early, or you're grabbing in the bucket and you're probably not getting any low guys. You notice on occasion, and that's that Andrew right there, that early one there. So if you throw that out, we've had a few duds, but for the most part, we're just talking, are you getting elite? Or are you getting a pretty damn good one? But unfortunately, at the weekly level, 6, 8, 10 point difference, folks, that's that you're going to be so good elsewhere to get over that. So that's a hell of I guess, a burden to carry down the trail is what we're talking. So now that's what we're debating. We're not talking about a bust versus, the best ever. We're just talking a great one versus a pretty good one. And that's still going to cost you. So that weekly concept and beating the game weekly, that sometimes that gets lost in this kind of data. If you overplay the early but the late, but if you think about it like that, even a pretty good quarterback can cost you the championship for your league. So, but you can see pretty much that we're doing pretty well early on. And what I
and
yeah.
Professor, I applied this logic to a dynasty uh superflex league last year
Uh,
because I was drafting very late in the first round.
mhm.
So instead of taking the 10th best quarterback, I pivoted and I made the assumption that my below average and my lower quarterbacks were what was now available to me in this draft. And I said, no, they're not going to change much over the next few rounds. So I'm going to take guys that are elite at running back and wide receiver. Now, I did, thanks to my weekly values tools, I had guys like Kirk Cousins, like Jordan Love, Matthew Stafford, all valued higher than what the people in this league were valuing. Those were my quarterbacks. And then I added Will Levis and Tannehill for some depth because it was super flex. So what I basically did is I said, okay, I'm not going to have an elite quarterback. I'm okay with that. I'm going to take 4 shots at a starting quarterback in my super flex from rounds 3 through 6, basically.
Yep.
3, 4, and 5, I went all quarterback because I knew that the quality of the quarterback would be falling off. Actually, I think it was 4th through 7th that I drafted quarterbacks. And yes, I got lucky. but it was dynasty. So I knew a couple of the older guys like Stafford and Cousins would be undervalued. But the key is knowing this data from your previous studies that once you miss on the elite guys at any position, the fall off in that next layer is more subtle. So you're losing fewer points against the competition by pivoting to another position. And that's what this data shows you. So if you were asleep at the wheel and you missed out on the elite quarterbacks, settle for somebody, take two shots at an above average and a long shot pick that you thought might do well. And maybe that's a rookie in one quarterback leagues, because in 1 year leagues with one quarterback, those rookies, for all the right reasons, get undervalued.
Right.
And if you ended up with a Stroud and a Richardson last year, Richardson got hurt, so that one hurt you. But if they stay healthy, they were good options. So this data is very valuable.
And so what I did on this may be our last figure here. So what I did was I just looked at the box top to the top whisker, and then the median up to the top of the box, the excellent versus above average. And I just plotted that by bar graph, and then I did a trend line for you, Dennis. So that just hammers home, since I thought you were pretty much getting one or the other. So I was eliminating the sucky choice. And so now what this says to me is there was a historically little peak at about the 70, maybe to the 78th, but it was starting to go. I guess the peak was around 61 to 66. So what is that, round 6? Are we back to the round 6 concept again for quarterbacks? Even though I think recently round 3 and 2 and 3 are even more extreme. But now you can use this data and plot kind of where it looks like from 31 to about 54, the better quarterbacks have bottomed out compared to the other ones. So it's best to grab it early than wait till 55 to maybe 72. Again, if this was exactly how it's going to be, in 2024, you would just follow this pattern. And then again, the okay quarterbacks come in at about the 90th pick. They predominate pretty much the rest of the draft here. But there's that second peak right there around 5, 6, 7. There's something happening there historically, even though last year maybe not so much, but historically, if you put all the data, so it says early, wait a little bit, come back later in your, so if you're going to do a late round, my definition of late round would be before the 6th round. So I know previously people waiting deeper. That's why 6th round have just been in my head based on the data. And again, you've done the counts, but another way to come to that same conclusion is looking at this data.
Fascinating data, Professor, because you don't want to be after the drop off ever.
No.
In fantasy football, you want to.
You don't want to be drafted on that slope going down.
No, because that's ending a run at a position that is not starting a new run.
No.
And again, my track record of success tells me that I'm best when I'm picking an elite quarterback, and I'm having to go earlier and earlier every year. Used to be I'd visit the elite quarterbacks in rounds 4 through 6. Now it's rounds 2 through 4. So you're always having to adjust to how the game is adjusting. That's why at quarterback specifically, I kind of go off of the numbers.
Have you looked at any of the current ADP? I've deliberately not looked, but I'm just curious. Is Mahomes number one? I don't even know who's number one.
Mahomes is not number one. Allen is number one
Okay.
right now.
Is
Lamar
this
Jackson,
underdog or where you is this
underdog.
calculate?
Lamar Jackson is getting hit heavy.
Okay.
Okay, so Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson
Mhm.
are two, and then it kind of gets a little bit to the Hurts, Mahomes, Herbert, Lawrence,
Mhm.
uh, and
Okay.
Burrow group, but people are a little
Okay.
worried about Burrow and his injury, and I think that's for good reason. But then it's dropping off quickly.
Okay.
So, but
So
Allen,
Anthony Richardson is not
he's
right now.
he's
People are asleep on him a little bit,
they're
huh?
a little bit scared of him. He's going
Well,
after
okay.
guys like Trevor Lawrence. So I
Yeah.
think he's going to be a bargain. I think Hertz is going to be a bargain
What
because
about
Hertz is still
Prescott?
going. Prescott's not being overdrafted. So you're probably going to get him in about the sixth or seventh round like
Well,
you did
that
last year.
again, that's about so folks, what I do, and I haven't done that, I'm not, this is back probably about June, I'll do best ball, but that's just I start looking and kind of getting some last quarterbacks off the boat kind of drafting and Prescott and maybe in an emergency break glass for Richard, as my first one. Now the second one, I just depends, just what the public's going to give me, right, in best ball, and probably grabbing three quarterbacks in best ball, but I may take an elite and take two late. Uh, Sometimes I'll take an elite and a middle and a late, or sometimes two middles and one late. It just depends on what the draft is giving me, right? I'm not stuck on anything. If people are waiting on certain picks, then that I'll go elsewhere. I try to give me what the league, the draft's given me, and not forcing my hand. I don't want to miss out on a good RB or WR because, oh, okay, it's round four. I got to do this. I don't got to do anything. You know, where's the value? I'm trying to sniff that out, and I'll be a lot more ready to go come June because I'll hear what Dennis's MVP is, his forecast, and so this is all just setting the table, folks. Right? Even down here in Arkansas, we do have a toothbrush because we brush our one tooth, but we do have some silverware. I know we eat with the Bowie knife and the fork and stick, but still we trim the haunches off the critters we catch with the Bowie knife. So we're pretty highfalutin down here in Arkansas, Dennis. But anyway, just realize I just kind of stepped out a little bit to say how can we apply this to the draft, and that's this is setting the table for thinking, right? We're not just glued to anything we see in any of this data.
No, and that's the great strategy is you've got to use the data from the past as a guidance for the future,
Yep.
not a set in stone for the future, because as we've seen with these charts, the data is always evolving. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. The professor has some great lesson plans for you to check out, and all kinds of ADP data waiting for you there. Check out my MVP articles. Hey, next week I'm going to be introducing the best index.
The best,
No,
finally
it's
the
not
best.
it's not the best of indexes. It's just
Oh,
a best ball index that
wow.
I think also has some
Nice.
usage in both redraft and in dynasty, but it's
Nice.
specifically a test of who had the best season the
Yes.
previous year. It's not a forecast of the future. It is just looking back, but sometimes looking back can give you a clue as
Mhm.
to what will happen in the future. So head on over there, check out all of that data at the scienceoffantasyfootball.com, and then come on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.